Hi folks, welcome to Cláisín. My name is Nicola Brown, and during this video I would like to share with you how I create lasting and colourful prints on felt and other natural materials using homegrown vegetation in a health conscious and sustainable way. I work primarily without metal salts, the traditional powdered mordants that are used to fix colour on fabric. So that limits the vegetation that I can use to get lasting colour, but by experimentation, plenty of failures as well as successes, I've identified leaves, seed pods and bark that grow in my area here of Southern Ireland that will give me lasting and colourful prints. Perfectly washable, they stand the test of time. Through my teaching abroad, I also have identified many types of vegetation in different parts of the world that do the same. But I cannot urge you enough, if you would like to try doing this for yourself, start with the basics. If you are working without powdered mordants, start from something simple like working with onion skins that I can state categorically will give you colour, and then bit by bit experiment to see what you have growing in your own locality that will do the same. So I hope you enjoy this insight into my life here, and let's go. Handmade felt really is the perfect fabric to eco-print. Any protein-based fabric, in fact, such as wool, silk, cashmere, yak, all of those absorb the colour very, very well from the eco-printing pot without the need for traditional powdered mordants. Cellulose fabric, on the other hand, doesn't absorb the colour as well, and for this reason I like to play around with that fact when I am making my felt. By using a cellulose fibre such as bamboo, banana, tencel, viscose, etc., to embellish your felt, this leads to wonderful highlights and areas where this fibre does not absorb as much colour in the printing pot. And then if you choose to use an optional layer of Firestar over the top of your embellishing fibres, the cellulose fibres, this actually is a nylon fibre and it does absorb colour from the dye pot or the printing pot. So this is the only artificial fibre I use in my studio, but it does really add a sophisticated sheen to the finished piece of eco printing. A tip I like sharing with workshop students is the fact that I always soap my wool before I add the embellishing fibres, and in that way I can lift them up and reposition them if I need to. It also means that they stand out more on the surface of the finished piece of felt, whether it's eco-printed felt such as this Nuno felt wrap, or whether it is a coloured felt with coloured embellishing fibres. You can see here the cellulose is the whiter colour and it's crinkled nicely as the felt was shrinking, and the sheen comes from Firestar. I'm now going to take you through the step-by-step process for creating colourful and lasting prints on felt, wool, silk and any protein-based fabric, and share one simple way of achieving lasting prints on cellulose-based fabric without using traditional powdered mordants. I'm now ready to roll my felt, and this has been soaking overnight in plain water. I usually do this immediately after felting. I give it a really good rinse out in my washing machine and then I soak it overnight in the water. I learned this tip from Joan Morris, an amazing natural dyer and stitched resist shibori artist from America, and she said when I did a retreat with her that if you soak your fabric, regardless of what your fabric is, whatever you're going to be dyeing, if it's soaked for a minimum of 1 hour beforehand, this leads to more intense colors. And when I came back from the retreat, I started soaking my felt and all my other textiles for eco printing. And I find that if I do an overnight soak, I get more intense colors than if I just do a shorter soak. So once you've had your fabric or your felt soaking, you need to get it to the stage where it's not sopping wet. So I've given this a bit of a squeeze, but I find that if I do too much or a larger piece, this is only the small piece that I want to show you just to demonstrate technique. If I have a large piece, I'm starting to lose power in my wrists. So just roll it up in a towel, give it a little bit of a roll and a squeeze in a dry towel. And this now has moisture in it. It's not sopping wet. It's really perfect for proceeding to the next stage. So what I want to do is just stretch it into shape. For some reason, my washing machine went a bit berserk yesterday and it was very aggressive in the wool setting, so this got a little bit more work than I had intended. This is the side that has tencel and fire star. This is the side with just tencel embellishment fibers. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sprinkle some vinegar on this. Now this happens to be some apple cider vinegar that's actually pretty much gone off from my larder, but it's good for demonstrating as well because in fact you can see the color of it. But you can use whatever vinegar is the cheapest. Usually I use malt vinegar or white vinegar. So both sides of my felt have some vinegar now sprinkled on. What you can also do is you can soak your pieces in a vinegar water solution overnight rather than plain water if you find your hands enough or strong for squeezing it, and just squeeze that out in the morning and pop the vinegar water into your printing pot. It enhances the results. So now, here we go. With this piece, and to demonstrate the technique, I'm going to just use food grade materials. I'm not going to use any iron, and I'm going to process this actually in one of my own kitchen saucepans. The reason I'm doing this is I want to show you that with food grade materials, if you wanted to try doing this at home yourselves without actually having dedicated printing pots and without using the iron and copper pipes that I love using to modify the color, you can do this and experiment, and then if you enjoy the technique you can proceed then to doing more complicated things, but also things that will give you enhanced color. So that's my felt. What else do I need? For this piece I'm just going to use onion skins. There's some red ones and some brown ones. I find the brown onion skins give me the best color, and the outside curve of the onion skin gives a darker color than the inside curve. I have some black tea leaves. These need to be used very judiciously, not too much, or they are not as attractive on your piece. So I like to either have loose tea, which this is, or cut a tea bag, put the tea into a container and then sprinkle it very lightly on my piece. It can be difficult to get out of felt afterwards, and too much can just it can look a little bit messy. It's not as attractive on the finished piece. But the other thing that I have here today, which is just in my larder at the moment, this is turmeric root. So I can slice this, and I can actually include this in my bundle. I'm going to just do it to show you. I'm going to slice it on a diagonal. Now, the reason I'm using this and not powdered turmeric is I want to get direct contact prints. That's what eco printing is all about. If I just use the powder, it's going to actually color it in places, but I find that this gives me a strong print, and also it stands the test of time fairly well. I think it doesn't seem to fade. It's quite good. So I'm just going to show you how I would use that. Obviously I need a scissors for cutting the string, and because I'm using food grade equipment in one of my own pots in the kitchen, I am using new tying material. This is t-shirt yarn, and this will be safe to use. I'm only doing this one sample in the kitchen, and this will be safe to use in my cooking pot. So would butcher's twine. You need something that's strong and that's not going to break, but that's safe to put in cooking equipment if you don't have dedicated eco printing equipment. So this is what I'm using. For all the rest of my eco printing, I reuse this multiple times and it looks very black and dirty, but because I'm in the kitchen, I'm being safe with this. For this piece of flat felt, I have decided I would like a symmetrical print on one side. So I fold it in half, press down, and this will create a slight crease, so I can see now that I want to lay my onion skins and vegetation on one of these sides, and then when it's folded over, that vegetation is going to make direct contact with the other half of the piece, and I will get a mirror image. Now, using different vegetation, you often need to put some leaves, for example, up and some down. But with onion skins, although the curved outer portion and the inner portion, they give subtly different prints, it is quite balanced compared to certain leaves. So you can see here I can press down on it. I don't want to over stress with my layout. I want to keep things simple. Negative space is also very important. So don't smother your piece with vegetation, whatever sort of vegetation it is. In this case, I'm going to add a few more pieces of onion skin, maybe a little bit of red onion. So I'm putting the second piece of onion skin down against the felt in the reverse way to the other one. And I'm just going to add this piece of red onion at the bottom. And then in the finished piece, we'll see if you can notice any difference in colour between the red and the brown prints. With the turmeric, I'm going for the flatter slices rather than the knobbly end. And again, I'm leaving space so that ideally there will be a pleasing design and negative areas, which will then show off the prints. A little sprinkle of black tea is all that this requires now on this side, and that's the layout on that side finished. When I fold the other half of the piece over the onion skins and the turmeric and tea, I try not to shift my design too much, but I also don't want to titivate it too much. Just when you are doing this, trying to keep things simple. You can then stretch your felt and press down. I'm going to be rolling from the end nearest me, and before I do that, I'm going to add some more onion skins, some pieces with the curve up, some with the curve down, and some slices of turmeric with a sprinkle of black tea. I'm basically echoing the design I have on the inside. This is going to print differently. It's not going to be a mirror image, but I will explain that when we have the reveal a little bit later. Once the design is laid out on this side to my satisfaction, I then get my t-shirt yarn, which I'm going to use to tie the piece. I actually like putting the main ball of yarn on the ground or in a container on the ground, and then usually leaving the loose end close to me. I'm going to be rolling up very, very tightly from the bottom. We are making direct contact prints. I cannot emphasize this enough. If you do not have your piece tight enough, you will have color, but you won't have prints. And while I roll this, I'm very conscious that the fold line up the middle and the outside, I want that fold line to be straight. I don't mind if that outside edge is a little bit wavy because it's going to take some interesting color from the pot, but I do want to try and keep that center line where the fold is as even as possible. Don't stress too much if vegetation moves when you're rolling it up. This is not an exact science. Just roll it up firmly and tightly, and you can give it a little bit of a squeeze at the end, and you can see now I've got a nice tight bundle here. I'm also choosing to put some onion skin under my string, and you're going to see what this looks like in the finished piece. I choose to use a surgeon's knot, so I put the loose end under once and under twice, and then I really give a good pull. This means that when I do this, this is the very first knot I do. This actually helps hold my bundle together, but it means later on it's easier for me to actually open the bundle. So try and roll the tying material in the same direction as you have rolled up the felt. By this I mean that the string is going, you can see it here, it's wrapping in the same direction as the felt is sort of rolled up. I'm just adding some onion skins under, and I go relatively quickly up to one end, and then when I get near the end, at this outside edge, I want to be careful that the string doesn't fall off the edge, but I give it a really good firm roll around a couple of times. This will just prevent a lot of the pot liquid seeping into the center of the bundle. And then I go back to where I started, but this time I am actually keeping the yarn probably no more than 1 centimeter, each wrap 1 centimeter away from the other one, even a little bit closer. And you can see as I work that the bundle is getting more compressed. I can just keep positioning bits under. When I get back to where I started, I now have a little loose piece coming out. I want to be careful not to cover that. So I just take that, I put it under my hand, and then I continue wrapping to the end of the piece, which is now the inside of the bundle. This is going to be the center line. And let's just put a piece of turmeric under. And when I do the final roll at the end, this end of the bundle, which is the center line, I also go around a couple of times really tightly. So I find that this helps prevent too much pot liquid seeping into the center. So I now go back to where I originally started, and then I'm going to tie a knot with the loose end and with the long piece of string. So under once and pull, get it really firm and repeat. Try not to do loads of different knots, just one simple one for later. Now I put my hand on the knot and I cut the string the full length up to my shoulder. So I now have my bundle ready for the eco printing pot. It's tied very firmly. I've got some onion skins and turmeric on the outside, and that's it. It's as simple as that for the first piece. Health and safety is really important when you're processing bundles. You will create steam if you're working in your kitchen, so you need to have your house well ventilated, windows open, etc, etc. And when you're lifting the lid off any pot, be very careful that you don't get a steam burn. It is so easy to do so. And because of the high temperatures that I like to work at to achieve the best prints without traditional powdered mordants, that's even more important. I also have safety boots on my feet, and I don't wear loose floppy clothes when I'm printing. I wear something that's comfortable. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the lid off, being careful not to burn myself. I'm just going to pop it down there for a minute and I can dry off the cooker afterwards. So when you're adding your bundle to the pot, be very careful. Don't drop it in, just insert it very carefully and let it go underneath the pot liquid. And then the loose end that you had, which comes up to your shoulder when you're doing the bundle, tie that to a handle on the outside. The reason for this is that then it's easy, just one little knot is okay. It's easy to keep track of what is actually happening and I like to tie from the front towards the back, and then I make a note in a notebook or on an app on my iPad of what bundle went in at what time. But it does make sense to have several bundles ready to process at the one time, and in that way you are conserving energy. So I just put the lid back on while I was talking, because even a drop of temperature for a small amount of time means more energy to bring it back to boil. So what I want to do now is I'm going to add this bowl of onion skins, and I'm also going to add the last of that vinegar that I had. That will help sharpen the colours. Some people don't believe it makes a difference, but I firmly do. You can get good prints without, but I like the intensity of the colours when I also use vinegar. So again, very carefully, I don't want a steam burn on my wrist. I'll take the lid off, and in fact, to make this a little bit safer this time, I'm just going to pull that out. I'm going to tip all these onion skins in. I'm going to tip the vinegar in. I don't need to push the onion skins under, they will go under in a minute or two as they boil. And I'm just going to put this back on the heat, there. When it comes back to boil, which will only be a minute or two, I'm then going to transfer it over onto the Rayburn, which is on all the time. That's my big range, and that cooker is on the whole time. It doesn't get the intensity of heat that the gas would, but once I have this at a good boil and transfer it, it should be able to maintain the boil for the processing time. The pot and the liquid came back to a boil, and it's now on the Rayburn. Pip, who's not used to being inside, this is my new rescue collie. She's finding the steam fascinating. I'm just going to lift the lid off so you can see how bubbly it is. It's just been on here for a few minutes. So this is the sort of temperature I like to process my bundles at. The onion skins are releasing colour already into the water, and that will mean that I have some really nice marks where the ties are, because they will act as a resist and they will remain white, but the dye from the onion skin will colour the outside of the bundle. And you will see this when I open it later during the video. Working without traditional powdered mordants for my eco printing is such a rewarding process for me, and I need very, very little. I have everything I need here on the table, and I'm going to share one or two tips with you, particularly about the vegetation. So what I have here is my tying material that I'm using today. This is a t-shirt yarn that I've already used before, but you can also use any kind of strong twine that is going to be firm enough that it won't break. You need to have your bundles tied extremely tightly, and when I reuse it, I just literally tie a knot like that, just to attach one piece to the next. And those knots then can become a little bit of a feature in areas of my eco printing where I'm tying the bundle or where I'm rolling, because you can actually see that knot in the print. So there's my string that I'm using. Then I like to use the metal that I roll or wrap my pieces around to modify the color that I achieve, and also to help make the prints more color fast and light fast. So my favorite metal is always rusty metal. So here's a rusty metal pipe. You have to be very clear, you don't want sharp ends, so I would file the end if necessary. And you want a pipe that's going to fit into your processing pot with a small bit of additional space at either side, because when you roll your fabric up with the pipe, strangely enough, it's almost like they get bigger, and the pipes can tilt a bit, and often you can't get it into the pot. So make sure that there's a little bit of extra space at either side if you're having some pipes cut. So that one there is a rusty metal one. Copper gives different modification. The rust makes things deeper, darker. Some people say it saddens the color, and the copper can make color more vibrant, but it's most effective with certain eucalyptus leaves and with onion skins, I find, whereas there are other leaves such as blackberry that I find prefer or need the iron. If I use copper with blackberry, I do not get such good prints with the blackberry as if I use the iron with the blackberry. And these are wonderful metal plates. I got these in a salvage yard in Canberra in Australia when I was over there teaching and visiting. And these are sharp at the edges, so I just have to be careful. I fold some of my textiles with these just to be careful that the textile is within the confines of this, and this sharp point doesn't cut something in the printing pot. Believe me, I have done that on occasion. This is a wooden dowel. Often when people come to me for hands-on workshops, they can't bring everything home in their baggage because they have they've often bought things while we're out and about. And in fact, this pipe came from somebody on an international workshop, and I brought it home with me. So wooden dowels, if you want something to roll around but you don't want the modification of color, they're very good. They can float in the pot, so you often have to push them down under the water. You can also roll without anything. It's easier with felt or something firmer. And dryish bits of eucalyptus bark are also wonderful, and they print as well. Now, when I have a think about leaves to use, these leaves were soaking in some water, what I call eucalyptus water, and I top up my pot with that. But these leaves are windfall leaves, and this particular variety, the Junama snow gum, this does not print well without maybe a traditional mordant, or I also work with tannin and iron without pre-mordanting the fabric, and in that case it will give prints, but it will act as a resist. So if I put this underneath my tie marks and I have color in the pot that will actually be absorbed by the fabric, this can give very interesting effects. I just have it here because I brought the bucket with me. This leaf, on the other hand, or this branch of leaves, this has also been soaking in the water. This is fantastic. This particular leaf is Eucalyptus gunnii, and the specific variety is called Azura. This gives wonderful prints. With the Azura, or some of these types of twigs, where the leaves are on either side, I like to cut across. And this is very nice. It looks very attractive, and it's nice to lay that out on your piece. These little twigs here also print. And here's a good tip for blackberry. Now, this blackberry is very, very, very thorny. The stems do print, but these thorns are going to cut into all but the toughest fabric. So what I would like to do with these is to cut the leaf at the back like that. And that removes the majority of the stem. And then I'll just throw that away. So you can see here now that I've got my leaf there, and that's going to have far fewer thorns on the back than the big twig would have. But I can also just take a pipe if I want. Before I lay the leaves out, and that will actually help flatten them. So that's just a little tip for you. If I'm going to use these on silk, I would sometimes do that. I would roll them. If I was using them on a heavier wool or a piece of felt, I wouldn't bother. But for delicate fabric, you can just crush them at the back. Also, you don't want something really tough like this when you roll the fabric. That will actually cut into your fabric. So that would be okay to roll that way, but it wouldn't be okay to roll in that direction. So if you have vegetation that you would like to rehydrate, if it hasn't already been soaking or if it isn't fresh, just get a metal container, put the leaves in boiling water and they'll be ready in about 5 minutes, or you can soak them in cold water overnight. Just don't put boiling water into a bucket or you'll have a hole. That's really it. I've got some black tea here as well. Black tea can be very good if you're using iron. It gives nice little dark prints. It gives more golden brown prints with copper, but the tannin and the iron have a reaction in the pot and you get some interesting little black prints. Go easy on black tea though, because it's absolutely shocking to try and get it out of the fabric afterwards at times. So I think that's it. I'm just going to roll a few pieces now and let's see how that goes. This first piece is a silk scarf with onion skins and black tea, folded down the length, down the center line in the same way I demonstrated with the felt sample. It is important to really keep making sure that the piece is as tight as possible as you're rolling it up. The dry onion skins, just crush them as you work. If you need to learn how to do the surgeon's knot, just do a search online. I really find it absolutely invaluable. Next, I'm going to bundle another silk scarf with onion skins, but roll it up on a rusty metal pipe. And I'm also going to lay out a silk scarf with eucalyptus leaves, which you can see very briefly here. It's going to be folded in a different way to make it narrower. And then I'm going to use those metal plates I showed you earlier to fold it up as opposed to rolling it on a pipe. When I'm folding a silk scarf or any scarf along the length, I like to try and make sure that that outside edge, the rolled hem in this case, is as level and even as possible. This is going to be sort of a roughly abstract scarf. You're not going to see very, very definite prints. The reason I'm laying this out is really because I want to experiment with these small little leaves that I'm laying now. They're part of a bouquet belonging to a friend of mine. She got it on her graduation and I want to see, am I likely to get any sort of prints from them in colour, although they're going to be dark because I'm wrapping it around the metal plates. It will give me an indication of what I should do to make them sing for her in a piece I'm going to make her as a gift. I add some eucalyptus leaves onto the silk, onto the upper portion of silk, and I start folding and pulling and adding more leaves in so that I'm bundling it around these metal plates. I actually forgot to add leaves there, some of you may have noticed, and that's going to leave an area that has got less prints, and we'll see what that's like in the finished piece. But sometimes you forget something, sometimes you choose not to put it in. But because this scarf is folded in half along the length and then in half again, there are going to be some sort of definite stripes and bands of colour. There are going to be areas where the rusty metal has influenced it and where the leaves are. I need to make sure to tie this very tightly, and you can see where I'm actually having the knot just at that narrower bit where the scarf is folding over the edge of the plates. This helps make it tighter and more secure for the pot. One simple way of achieving prints on cellulose fabric and garments is to dip it in a rust water solution. What I like to do is wash my garments first, soak them overnight in water, in plain water, and then I have this rusty pot with rainwater in it. I just swirl it around to get the rust particles dispersed in the water, and then I dip the garments or fabric in. Note that I have iron written on these gloves. I don't want to contaminate any of the natural dyes I might be using, making with the plants, so I just want to control everything I'm doing. So once the water is swirled around, put your garment or your yardage, whatever cellulose fabric you want to print, into this solution and hold it under the water for a total of 40 seconds. Having experimented with different lengths of time in the pot, I have found that 40 seconds appears to be the magic number. Lift it out, squeeze it well, lay the piece out on your table ready for adding the vegetation. Eucalyptus leaves are invaluable to any eco printer. On wool and silk, many varieties print red, although not all do. It's a big mistake to think they do. Here I'm using 3 different types of eucalyptus. All of these are windfall leaves from the trees at Clasheen. The ones I'm laying down, those rounder ones at the bottom, they actually do print red on wool and silk or felt, but the rest of the leaves give various shades of brown through to some sort of plummy purple colours on protein. However, on the cellulose fabric, you're going to see afterwards that these give very, very nice prints, although they aren't colourful, but they are nice and striking. So any eucalyptus leaves really will usually give prints on cellulose fabric. So if you have a t-shirt to upcycle, work away, but you do need to remember to dip your shirt or whatever you're upcycling into the rusty water first. As with the piece of felt that I bundled and I'm processing in the kitchen, this shirt is going to be folded in half at the front for a mirror image, but I don't want to forget the collar either. So I'm going to actually stick a selection of leaves inside the collar and sort of under the points of it, because when the shirt is actually worn, I want there to be some prints on the collar, on the outside of the collar. The pockets and collar of this shirt also look a different colour. That's because they're cotton woven, whereas the body of the shirt is linen. When I fold it over, I'm going to try and make it as even as possible and get that centre line pressed flat. I don't fuss too much, and I advise you to do the same. Just go with the flow. I'm now going to be laying vegetation on this back half up there, and then I'm going to fold the sleeves in and roll the piece from the bottom up. So the first thing I'm going to do is put vegetation on this back portion. As with the felt, I echo the vegetation that I have on the front of this shirt. I echo that vegetation on the back. So I'm using the 3 different varieties of eucalyptus again, and once I have this main piece laid out, I am then going to fold the sleeve down, as you'll see in a minute. But I wouldn't just put a huge big sprig up. I groom things a little bit so that you can actually see that leaf print better. Remember what I said before, trying to have some negative space. When I'm happy with how I've laid the leaves, I then carefully fold the short sleeves over onto the back, bringing the 2 of them across together, because don't forget there already are leaves sandwiched between them. They would be the leaves from the front side. And I just continue my design by adding a few more leaves onto that sleeve. Now for this particular piece, I'm going to be using one of my favorite cast iron pipes for rolling it up. It's always easier to roll from a straight end up towards an oddly shaped end. So I'll be rolling from the base of this garment up towards the neck. One of my top tips when working by yourself is to add something heavy at the opposite end of a bundle when you're rolling it up. It can be difficult if you don't have a second pair of hands to keep things tight and taut, and this is really important to get crisp prints. So I'm just putting a bucket with water and leaves on the end here, and I can just pull against myself. And you can see here that as I roll up, the leaves that are on the actual garment that you can see me moving there, they will also make contact with the other side, the side that's against the table, and therefore the side that's against the table is getting prints. Don't worry if you have any kind of flecks of rusty water either, they will be absolutely fine. And for this particular piece, not only am I doing my surgeon's knot as usual and doing my ties, but I'm also going to add some leaves underneath the string mark. This makes nice details, and it just means that the rest of the shirt that doesn't have vegetation on it, all that outside of the bundle, is going to have prints too. If you happen to run out of tying material in the middle of wrapping a bundle, don't worry, just add some more string and keep going. Once the bundle is fully tied off, make sure to leave a length of string. This is going to be used to tie the bundle to the handle of the saucepan. You're going to see how useful this is once I put them into the pot. After I've given the linen skirt a 40-second submersion and swirl around in the rust water, I lay it out on the table, and although the zip is at the side of the skirt, I've chosen to position it in the center for this part of the process. I try and protect the zip as much as possible. So I'm using blackberry, wild blackberry or bramble leaves for this, but if you do not have access to them, rose leaves are wonderful with rusty water and an iron bar. So most people should be able to get rose leaves from a florist. They usually strip them from their rose stems, and most florists will give you them free. So I think regardless of where you live, you can probably access rose leaves if you can't get brambles locally. So position some up, some down, as I'm doing, if you decide to try them, because they give a different print from the front and the back of the leaf. And I've decided for this skirt, I'm going to do a sort of a rough concertina style folding. Sometimes with these pieces that are not particularly symmetrical, it's difficult to work out how to fold. And at the end of the day, I am looking for nice prints and colour, but a more abstract design. I keep adding leaves, some up, some down, and just go back and forward sort of concertina style in a relatively random way. But I'm always just keeping an eye on the zip, and I'm keeping that bottom edge relatively even, the edge at the bottom of the skirt. Although I haven't added any tea leaves anywhere else, I suddenly decide, just on the spur of the moment, to have a little sprinkle here. Tea and rusty water and a rusty metal pipe tend to have a nice relationship. So sometimes I'll just put something in a little bit randomly when I'm going through the laying out process and the mood takes me. I've chosen to roll this bundle up on one of my favourite rusty metal pipes, making sure to keep it as firm as possible, but not stressing if there are little creases in the piece. When I tie it, I'm also going to include some blackberry leaves on the outside of the bundle. Do not be alarmed by the fact that the fabric looks very sort of golden brown at this stage. It will also look similar in colour once it's printed, but as soon as I wash the piece out to finish it, all that goldeny brown colour will go, and you'll see that the fabric is actually a very, very beautiful creamy white colour with the prints. Once the bundle is tied tightly, I make sure to measure the string up to my shoulder and leave that long tail ready to pop it in the pot. I like to use the pot as mordant. That phrase means that the composition, the metal that my pot is made from, will help influence the colour and prints I achieve. The pot liquid I am using has been used to process bundles multiple times. So I'm using an aluminium pot and what looks like very dirty water with a big chunk of rusty metal in the bottom and some windfall eucalyptus vegetation. If you have never eco-printed before, I recommend an aluminium pot, half fill it with water, add at least a pint of vinegar, and if you have a decent chunk of rusty metal, such as a horseshoe, pop that in also. Adding eucalyptus leaves or bark, twigs and onion skins will enhance the pot liquid, but it's really not necessary if you don't have access to them. I'm now ready to put my bundles in the pot. The pot is boiling and I need to be very careful lifting the lid off that I don't get the steam burn. So I have a cloth with me. I have good shoes on and I don't have any loose clothes. My hands may look very dirty, but these can be washed afterwards, so don't worry about your hands. You can wear gloves if you want, but lemon juice will take the stains off. So the first one that I'm going to put in is this piece because it's got very sharp edges. That's going in first, and then this means that it won't catch any of the others because I don't want to tear the fabric of the other bundles. After the pot comes back up to the boil, I will show you everything, but for now I need to concentrate and just put these in very carefully. So that one is the most difficult because of the sharp edges, and I'm going to tie this beside the string that has that old iron. So that's the first one I'm going to put there, number one. Then I need to look at these bundles with the wider diameter. The more you have with wider diameter, the more difficult they are to fit in the pot. So I would put these in next. And each time when I put one in, whoops, I want to make sure that it's totally submerged by the water. So that's bundle number 2. This is the next fattest one. This will go in now. And once it's underneath, I'll tie that. Then these ones, there's more space in the pot, and sometimes I might tie on this side if I'm using vegetation that needs different processing time. So if I have leaves such as blackberry, sycamore, rose, they like 2 to 2.5 hours. I would tie them on one side of the pot, and I would tie leaves that need longer processing time on the other. But today, these are all pretty much going to be processed for the same amount of time. 2.5 hours. And then one of those that went in is a silk scarf with onion skins. This is a silk scarf with onion skins, but this one is wrapped around a copper pipe. So I want to just show you the difference between the felt, which is being processed in a pot with no metal, and silk, which is also protein based, that is going to be processed in this pot. And that we've got silk with onion skins on copper, silk with onion skins with rusty metal, felt with onion skins, no metal. Here's a glimpse into the pot just after I've added the bundles and before I put the lid on and set my alarm for 2.5 hours. Once the processing time has elapsed, 2.5 hours in this case, I turn the gas off, and I also turn the gas off at the cylinder itself. I use fire tongs and a towel to help me. So with the dry towel, I just carefully lift the lid up. I do not want to get a steam burn, and I place that down on the gravel. If you remember, I tied the bundles onto the handle of the pot. So I now start taking them out, and I take them out in the reverse order to that in which they went in. And I can use the fire tongs to help me. It's important not to give yourself a burn, and to be aware that some of the vegetation from the pot liquid may actually have gone inside the pipes or tubes or whatever you're rolling on. So just make sure to drain them over the pot before you lift them out, and don't put them close to your body or your feet as you take them out, or you may suddenly get a deluge of boiling water on your foot. Don't ask me how I know that. It has happened in the past. So that first bundle was rolled on a copper pipe. This is one of the silk scarves that's on a cast iron pipe, and bit by bit I'm going to take all these bundles out. The fire tongs are actually very handy for taking out any flatter bundles. I don't have to touch the metal, and the tongs, I can use them to hold them. I also have one other piece of string tied here on the outside of this aluminium pot, and this is an old rusty metal iron. I like processing my bundles with that in the pot. The felt bundle in my cooking pot from the kitchen is now ready to come out. I actually left it in a little bit longer than planned because I got so wrapped up in what I was doing outside. It's not an issue with onion skins, and also if you're working with eucalyptus leaves, to process for a longer time. But rose and blackberry are better between 2 and 2.5 hours using this method without powdered mordants. make sure to use really sharp scissors when you open a bundle, and make sure the tips of the scissors are pointing upwards before you make a snip. It's very, very easy to cut your felt or whatever fabric you are working with. The ties are leaving a really nice resist area where the felt underneath has not absorbed the onion skin dye from the actual pot. You can see here there are going to be some beautiful lines on my piece, and I'm going to take the vegetation off that I had under the string marks as well, and that's given a little print of its own, as has the one little slice of turmeric that I had under the ties. When unrolling a bundle to reveal the prints, try to keep the vegetation down on the actual portion of the felt or fabric that you laid it out on. It doesn't seem very important right now. We know this is onion skin and it is turmeric with a sprinkle of black tea. But trust me, later on when you start working with leaves, you really want to be able to assess which leaves, which sort of vegetation, if it's bark, whether it's the outside of the piece or the inside of the piece near the center of the tree, which piece of vegetation has given which print. So this is a very good tip for the beginning. Just take your time when you're unbundling and assess what is happening in a mindful way. Before turning this over to reveal the underneath of this side, I open it out to check these symmetrical prints on the center. This is where we laid, or where I laid, the onion skin and turmeric and the black tea first. As you can see, it's printed extremely well. I have a symmetrical pattern, and the red onion skin, the one piece that I put in, it is the piece in the center bottom as we look at it here, and it's a slightly different color. It's a sort of it's maybe a more purpley red color. It doesn't always happen that it's that purple, but it is definitely a different color than the brown onion skin prints. If there was iron involved in this, that purpley color actually can shift more towards olive. The biggest drama of this piece is actually going to be on the other side, the side where the tie marks are. So let's turn it over. And here you have it. You can see how the onion skins in the pot liquid influence the colour under the tie marks, the dark stripe down the middle, and the nice border of colour around the edge of where the piece was bundled. So I really enjoy playing around with the colour in my printing pots to play around with the positioning of that in the finished piece. As we look at this piece, the vegetation was laid on the panel on the right, but it is also printed on the left. This is because it made contact with the other side when it was rolled up. And the effect is that the prints from each piece of vegetation is actually offset. It's not symmetrical and opposite each other, but you can see clearly that each piece of vegetation has printed on both sides. The felt was processed in a pot with no rusty metal, and these two scarves, one on a copper pipe and one on a rusty metal pipe, these were processed outside in the aluminium saucepan with some extra rusty metal in the pot. You're going to see clearly that the scarf on the rusty pipe, the colour has been modified by the pipe it's in contact with as well. So the colour of the onion skin prints is much darker on the pipe that was rolled around the rusty metal than it is on the pipe. It's much yellower on the copper pipe and much darker on the rusty metal pipe. The silk scarf that was bundled with mixed eucalyptus vegetation and folded on the metal plates, it too is very, very dark. That's the effect of the metal. There are lighter areas, and all the eucalyptus leaves, they're giving interesting results. Some slightly colourful prints modified by the iron, and some more of an outline and a dark print. You can also see the banding of colour, the influence from the metal plates. As I start to remove blackberry leaves from under the tie marks on the linen skirt, I can already see that they have printed the most beautiful purple. This is great news. If they're printing purple like this on the linen with the iron, they would print wonderfully on felt at this time of year. They can be a little bit seasonal, but honestly, they're wonderful on felt. The stronger dark colors are from where the back of the leaf makes contact with the fabric, and the lighter colors with more of an outline from where the front of the leaf makes contact. I'm very happy with how everything is looking. As I mentioned before, that sort of rusty colour in the background will actually wash out when I give this piece a very good wash and iron it to finish it. I'm going to look at the back now. And unfortunately, I would love to keep those really dark lines, but a lot of those will be very much fainter afterwards. The reason being that the dye that is not attached, the natural dye that is not attached to the linen, will wash out during the finishing process. Finally, I start to reveal the prints on the linen and cotton shirt. The knitted linen with the cotton pockets and the cotton neckline. And I am very, very happy with what I am seeing so far. I do find that knits take the colour a little bit differently anyway, but you can see as I open this that there are prints and some areas with maybe a little bit of resist from a twig there. And this was rolled around a cast iron pipe. There will be some oxidation still to occur. So as I take the leaves off and the air hits this piece, the prints actually will become a little bit darker. So this, at the moment, I'm working on the back. That was where the sleeves were folded in. And the tie marks are very, very beautiful up at the top of the shirt. Again, a lot of that colour will actually wash out in the finishing process, but that's only the dye that hasn't been absorbed by the fabric. The pockets and the area around the neck, they look a slightly different colour also because that's the cotton fabric. And the overall background, again, that more sort of rusty, goldy, beigey colour in the background, that will most likely wash out in the finishing process, and you're going to see some very, very nice prints on this piece, and I think I know quite a few men who would actually be very happy to wear this. Before any piece of eco-printed fabric can be considered fully finished, it needs a really, really good wash. I like to wash it with olive oil soap, and you need to wash your piece until the water runs clear. Here's my flat felt sample, and you can see how vibrant the colours are. There are prints from where I put onion skins under the tie marks, the vibrant print from the turmeric, the onion skin prints, and then the dark line down the middle and at the edges and the tie marks. They come from the onion skins in the dye pot. Pieces that have been in direct contact with rusty metal or iron need to be neutralized to prevent this iron eating into the fabric in the future. For a light scarf, I would just use a pinch of bicarbonate of soda in warm water, soak it for 15 minutes prior to washing, and for heavier and larger pieces, just use a little bit more bicarb of soda. All the other pieces that went into the dirty pot need to be neutralized, with the exception of the scarf on the right here, which was rolled around a copper pipe. It's clear to see when I put the scarf that was on the copper pipe side by side with a silk scarf also rolled with onion skins and black tea that had been rolled on a rusty metal pipe. You can see here how much the copper modifies the colour. The background is much more golden, and the black tea prints are a brownish colour. Whereas on the silk scarf with the same vegetation in the same pot for the same time, on this scarf that was rolled on a rusty metal pipe, the prints are much darker, they're deeper, and any speckles from black tea are actually black rather than brown. So it's very obvious that the metal, the direct contact with either copper or rusty metal, iron, has had an influence on the prints. When the felt is laid side by side with the two silk scarves, it's easy to see how the coloured pot liquid with the rusty metal has altered the background colour of the pieces too. With the felt, the background is a very, very pale colour and the prints stand out very strongly. With the two silk scarves, the background has a very sophisticated and more complex background colour. So I think it becomes more and more obvious the more you eco print how the pot liquid and the metals that you use influence the background and the overall prints of your pieces. This does not mean that I don't like the clarity of the prints on the felt. I do. But if I had wanted to have the same clarity and clear background on the silk scarves, I would have processed them in the pot at the same time rather than putting them in the pot with the rusty metal. For me, I love what the rusty metal does to the end result of my pieces. Once the linen and cotton shirt has been washed out, you can see that there is actually some reddish colour from the eucalyptus azura leaves, but the majority of the eucalyptus leaves have printed a purplish black on the fabric. The beautiful lines underneath the tie marks that were so vibrant and black looking when this piece was opened have also really muted. Any natural dye that has not been absorbed by your fabric needs to be washed out thoroughly before you can consider your pieces suitable for wearing. I'm delighted with how the linen skirt, the flared skirt with the blackberry leaf prints and the sprinkle of black tea has worked out. I'm really happy with the design of the piece. It's got a slightly abstract feel, but you can also see some very clear and crisp prints from the blackberry leaves. On the reverse side, again, where those beautiful dark marks were with the lighter areas from the ties, they are nothing like as obvious in the finished piece, but they are there, and I just really like the simplicity of how this skirt finally looks. It has a cohesive feel without being too obviously printed. From the result here, I know these blackberry leaves would have printed purple on felt. As well as onion skins, black tea and slices of turmeric, achiote seeds or annatto are another food grade material you can use in your regular cooking pot. If you are printing outside in an iron-rich pot, leaves to consider trying include blackberry, rose, raspberry, Acer pseudoplantanus, which we know as sycamore in Europe and sycamore maple in America, and many of the eucalyptus varieties give good prints. Eucalyptus bark also gives excellent prints, as do the seed pods of rosebay willow herb. I hope you have enjoyed this step-by-step tutorial and will have fun doing some experimenting for yourselves. I highly recommend with eco printing that you start with something that is almost guaranteed to give you success. And for me, that something is the outer dry papery skins from brown and red onions. Don't jump before you can walk or you will be disappointed, but if you start from the basics and slowly, bit by bit, add other things in, you will discover what grows in your own location and will give you equally beautiful prints on your felt. Have fun, enjoy the process, take great pleasure in the seasons changing. Don't bemoan the fact that sometimes there aren't suitable leaves for you to gather. It's seasonal. You can save them over the winter. These are the sorts of things that I actually share during online workshops. but it's very simple really. You can stave most leaves, you can store most leaves dry, but also some of the softer leaves actually freeze better than storing dried. So something like rose or blackberry, you would store them frozen, but thicker, tougher leaves such as sycamore or oak, they are perfect stored dry. Have fun, and I really look forward to seeing some of your prints on social media. If you would like to stay in touch with me, my handle is @clasheen, and that would be on Instagram and on Facebook. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you get up to in the future, and that's where you can see what I'm getting up to. Over and out from Clasheen.